How about now? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, dude, come here. I had to bring in my technical expert here.
I know your teenage daughter, right?
So, is he the only other one on? How come
All those other people.
right, how come I only see Mike? I want to be able to see everybody.
Probably because he's the administrator.
Well, I know.
Um,
That's why I click something and let's see here.
that's not it. Gallery view. There. So, looks like only 2 people.
Yeah, me and Mike.
Yeah, so.
They'll pop up.
It's the video.
Oh.
Because right now they don't have it so you can see them. They're probably just listening in, right?
I don't know.
So.
That's weird. So, do you see anybody else or?
Well, let's see. We have 6 or 7 in here, but I think we've got some people that are on without video, which is fine.
Right. Right. Yeah. Whatever.
It looks like you and I are the only ones that have active video going on.
Yeah. So you guys have. Yeah, you're the only guys with video. The other people are just probably listening.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool. You're scared.
Okay. And I've got 2 videos because my laptop is leaking out.
Yeah, we're getting some echo.
Okay.
Let me do this.
So reverb.
How's that? That went away?
Can you hear me
now?
It still echoes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me try this. I really did honestly practice with Zoom. Clearly, I'm just not that good at it. Okay, how about now? Any echo?
Nah, I'm seeing you twice. That's what.
Yes.
Well, I know. That's why it's echoing. So you have to kill one of them.
I got one on mute.
Oh.
Okay.
We're learning on the fly.
How about now? Can you hear me okay? The audio is okay?
Yep. No more.
Now it's good.
You have audio?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. I'm just going to do it on my laptop, even though I do have some stuff that I wanted to show with my phone. I'll just kind of reposition stuff as we get it. Hey, there's Eric Berg. I can see him. What's up, my man?
How you doing?
Super rad. Okay, so looks like we should just start because we're a couple minutes over. So welcome to, who knows what this is going to turn into. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. This is our, I think we'll do it weekly. This is a little meetup group for the guys on the EXCFE tech support group. And I thought what we would do is maybe run Garrett. What if you start and talk about, what it is you think you'd like to run through as far as your racing experience. I think your racing background would be helpful to know. This was not your first race, but it was clearly a ridiculous first Baja run. That's massive.
I don't have much racing background, really.
Yeah, your story's great. So maybe let's run through that, kind of give you the microphone here. And maybe if guys have questions at the end, we can keep the discussion going with just like a little Q&A with you. And then on the back side of that, I've got some technical stuff we'll go over with fuel pumps and fuel systems, filters, all kinds of, I got a bunch of parts here on my desk and we'll do that. So welcome all the other participants and Garrett, dude, roll with it.
All right, so I was on bikes from the time I was 10 till about 16. And then got away from bikes, just for whatever reason, got into car racing and such. And then marriage and kids, and was away from bikes until, well, about 27 years, really. I was into dirt racing cars and whatever else. And then we moved out to the Black Hills here in South Dakota, and lots of riding around here, and stumbled across a little video, Dust to Glory. And that relit the fire, so I did a little bit of racing when I was in high school, motocross, a lot of trails, a lot of poker runs, that kind of stuff. And then when I got back into bikes, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, first bike back was a 650R, of course, and, you know, the Honda XR. And then in the back of my mind was always I needed to do the Baja 1000. That seemed like a pretty crazy idea. Every time I bring it up to somebody, they kind of give you that look like, yeah, right. And you'll never do that, and this, that, and the other. And finally came a point where I knew I was getting a little older, a little more gray, and if we were going to do it, you know, we needed to get after it. And 40 days before we were going to have to leave to Ensenada, I decided, let's do it. So my buddy Bryce and I got the bike all prepped, and in 40 days we were at the starting line.
Okay, so you committed, like you paid the money 40 days before the race day.
Yep.
Okay. And there are dudes who do this year in and year out and have a whole year of plan, and you had 40 days. You had a little over a month. You're ridiculous. Do you have that general lack of like irresponsibility with other things in your life?
No, but I just had this sense that if I didn't do it now, it wasn't going to happen. I've gotten real close over the last few years. Yeah, I'm going to do it. No, I'm not. Yeah, I am. No, I'm not. And I just got tired of the hem-haw back and forth. And I found myself thinking about it to the point where you'll talk yourself out of it. Oh, I can't do it because of this, or I can't do it because of that. You know, oh, I'm not good enough to, you know, or the fear factor. Will I finish? My goal was to just finish. You know, I'm not some pro rider with a bunch of racing background. You know, I'm a fairly decent, you know, average rider. I just apparently have the ability to not quit, no matter how bad it hurts. And that's kind of bred into me in my upbringing, I guess. Once you set out to do something, come hell or high water, we're going to get her done. So I don't know. I just I was in okay shape, you know, average shape, I guess. But it was a fear factor, you know, letting other people down that get behind you on this, or looking like a, you know, a failure or whatever. You know, that's why most people don't do a lot of things, is fear. So I just finally said, screw it. We're just doing it. So luckily I had some
How much
support
did the expense worry you? Because it's expensive entry fee and then all the other associated costs involved.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's real. Dude, by no means am I, you know, some rich guy or whatever. I mean, I would do it probably again if someone else is going to pay for it, but I can't justify the kind of money it takes to do it. I'm just an average Joe with family, kids. It's expensive. It's $4,000 just to sign up. So it's kind of a one and done. I knew I had to finish it. I didn't know if I could afford to do it again. So.
Yeah. So I'm curious, in your background, do you have like ranchers and cowboys in your background? Because those guys tend to be bred like you, tough as hell, indestructible, finish the mission.
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in the logging industry. Kind of roughneck, pretty hardcore, no excuses. We go till we're done environment. And you know, for my grandpa, my dad, and my uncle, who I was around a lot. So the race itself, you know, but there's a lot of things I found. So that's my background. You know, we keep pushing, but I visualized this race so many times, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in my mind. Granted, I had never done the race, but I'd ridden down there a few times. Well, only 2 other times. So that was on my 3rd time to Baja. But the start, you watch all the videos, so you get a sense, right? And you've ridden down there of what the race is kind of like. So I just visualized the start and actually doing it. So when I got to the start line, I wasn't even nervous. It was weird. And then throughout the race, I kind of found that you find out a lot about yourself when you're in your helmet by yourself for 32 or 33 hours or whatever it was. So
Your finish time was like 33 hours and some change, 33 hours, 34 minutes. And wasn't 34 the cutoff?
yeah, so basically I had what, 20 5 minutes left before the cutoff, right?
Yes.
I lost about an hour and a half, roughly, maybe closer to 2 hours, with the fuel line issue up there behind Mike's Sky Ranch. My goal was 30 hours. I thought I could do it realistically in 30 hours. So I would have been close. I wouldn't have missed it by that much had I not broke down. To go back, to do it again, there's places where I could have picked up the pace a little bit, but I was running a fairly conservative race. I was just trying to finish, save the bike, save me physically. The last 150 miles were extremely painful. I was in a lot of pain. My lower back was just killing me.
Yeah. What were you saying inside your head to make that 150 mile to survive that?
Well, the backup before the 150 mile, last 150 miles, during the middle of the night, you know, you start to hallucinate a little bit when you've been on the bike that long. Seriously.
Were the cactus talking to you?
It looked like there was times out there coming through the San Felipe whoops and stuff, and then after San Felipe, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the morning before the sun was coming up, where it looked like I'd be looking. You got to think about it. All them hours of all you're seeing is the light. It's dark, pitch black, and all you're seeing is that light, right? Start getting tunnel vision, and I swear you see something down there like waving at you, and like a little kid or something, you know, in the middle of nowhere. Hey, Bryce.
Hey.
And you get up to that point, and it's a bush. You go by and you look, it's just a bush, you know. But there was a lot of out loud in my helmet to myself, focus, wake up, dude. Why are you doing this? You've got people like Bryce waiting for me at the next pit, wife, kids. Why am I doing this? You know, out loud to myself to try to wake myself up and focus. Thinking about other family members that have gone through some pretty tough challenges in their life. And thinking to myself, man, if they did that, I can do this. I mean, you're just all kinds of weird, goofy self-talk, just whatever it is to get you to the next pit, you know? So, and another thing was every time I found myself thinking about, man, I've got 300 miles or whatever left, I started getting down, and I remember back to somebody, another guy had done this race before, said, don't race the whole race. You'll never, ever make it. You only race from this pit to that pit to the next pit. Otherwise, you'll never finish it mentally.
Yeah, didn't you write the mileage down on your bars or somewhere on a sticker from each pit to pit? And so did you just focus on that section of mileage?
Yep. And dude, all the stupid little mind games you play out there with yourself, they work, and everybody's different what they need in that regard, obviously. Speaking of pits, so I used Bryce, you know, and his girlfriend and my wife and kids as my chase truck, but I was only seeing them at basically every other pit, not because of the logistics. And I was using Mag 7 for my just gas and go where the truck couldn't meet me. And so I'm out there. This was after the dry lake bed. I'm still heading. I think it's just before Matome washed. There's to be a pit, a Mag 7 pit at mile 450. I think it's 450 it was. And I'm looking at my fuel tank. I'm getting fairly low on fuel. That's another thing. I think it was hogging more fuel than I had anticipated. It was sucking down. I'm like, man, good thing the pit's coming up in a few miles because I'm getting low on fuel. So I get up to race mile 450. Nothing, no pits, just in the middle of nowhere. So I just passed the bike. So I'm irritated about that. Where in the hell's Mag 7 at? I just passed the bike. So I thought, well, if I run out of gas, I'll flag him down and bump some gas off of him. So I'm just putting. I'm trying to save fuel. Well, 5 miles later, well, there they are. There's the pits, and I was down to I ended up taking a little over 3.5 gallons. I got a 4-gallon tank, or 4 point whatever it is, 3 or whatever. But so going from pit to pit was stuff like that was kind of nerve-wracking, you know. Just staying focused, staying awake. There are times you start, man, I'm getting sleepy, shaking your head, you know, and that kind of stuff. So when you'd see the fans out there down around Zoo, what's that called? Zoo Crossing or whatever it is.
Up out of San Felipe.
Yeah, dude, there were so many people that was a big boost of energy because I'd never gone through there. Obviously, this is my first time doing it, man. It was a zoo.
So what did you think of those 6, 7, 8 foot deep whoops?
cussing them things after a while. Man, it got old.
There's like 7 miles of it.
That's a lot more than that.
Well, it's the deepest. The deepest
Oh, yeah.
is like 6-7 miles of that.
Yeah. Where it's like, are you kidding me? But I mean, yeah, well, you probably know down around San Felipe, it just goes for miles and miles and miles. It was just constant long. And you know, your average Joe can't pound them. You can't pound through those. Your average guy, you'd be so spent after a mile of that, you know?
Yeah.
So I just rode them.
Rode him.
Just rode them. What's the point? I'm just going for a finish. I'm not going for to place, you know, top 3, you know. So the goal was the finish. So I just rode through the whoops. I didn't pound through them.
Yeah. So what did you think of the 500 as a bike for that race? Obviously, you don't have anything to compare it to, but looking back on it now, do you think you made the right choice?
Yeah, like I say, I owned a 450X, a Honda 450X before this, which the bike of choice down there typically. That bike is more vibey. The 450X vibrates more than the KTM. So I think over long durations that wears on you. The 450X is a snappier bike, and yeah, it's all self-induced, but everybody likes to whip the throttle, and over time that wears you out. Where this bike, little smoother delivery, and like I said, over time that all adds up. It's a smoother delivery. It doesn't hit quite as hard. So for me, for your average guy to go ride long distance, yeah, I think this is a better bike. You'll conserve energy, you know. I never ran flex bars before. We threw those on us before. Those I think helped a little bit, you know. On a long race, every little thing helps. I'd never ridden with earplugs in before, ever. I mean, I thought, man, I better run earplugs. This is gonna be a long, long day, and a lot of noise for an extended period of time makes you tired. It doesn't play an effect on you mentally. I think it made a huge difference running the earplugs I got from Bryce here that's on. He hooked me up with some good earplugs that are intended for this kind of stuff, you know, motorcycles and such, and out, you know, wind noise and all that. And with running earplugs, for me anyways, it almost put me in my own little world, because it tunes out just enough of the noise where it almost helps you focus a little bit more. It cuts out that loud droning, you know, hours and hours and hours, that wah, you know. And so that made a big difference.
Okay, so you talked about survivability and just like the endurance factor. I know you had some stuff on your bike that helped for that. So you had like a Scott stabilizer, steering stabilizer. You had a nice seat. What were some of the things that you think were really solid choices? The flex bars. What else on your bike for long distance guys?
I think the Scott stabilizer, once in a while, you know, you were there when we got it set up properly. Down in Ensenada, we made that phone call, or you did. Having that set up properly, and I was pretty new to the Scott stabilizer. I saved mine a few times, you know. And then, of course, the seat concept seat is nice. Although I like to stand a lot, my riding style, I stand a lot. But after a while, you can only stand so much, right? And even that became a chore after a while. You almost have to ramp yourself up just to stand up, because your legs are just shot. Be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, stand, you know, because your butt's hurting, your back's hurting, I need to stand for a while. But the seat definitely helped. I mean, we all know if you've got these bikes that the stock seat sucks.
Yeah. Anything else that you did by way of like comfort, safety, suspension, anything related to that?
Bryce, feel free to chime in here when I forget stuff. Of course, we sent the suspension out. Didn't get crazy on the suspension. I mean, you can spend, you know, $2,500 if you want on suspension. I think we ended up spending $800-900, but just resprung the front for my weight and the bigger tank, you know. The rear, resprung it, and then pulled, you know, on the rear. Of course, Mike, you know, it's got the piston in the rear. Maybe you can do a better job explaining this than I do. But then when we had that removed and put the bladder in. Because these bikes with the piston in the rear suspension, you know, as you're hitting the whoops, over time it heats up and it'll fall behind basically.
Yeah, fade.
So we pulled that piston out. There's a bladder kit, of course, you know, bladder kit you put in for these. It seems to seems to help, and you don't have to spend a ton of money to do it. So.
Yeah, so what the bladder kit does, the advantage of that is instead of a mechanical piston that's sliding up and down in that little chamber. So I'm looking at your bike, I'm looking at the X in your number plate, the 753X, and then just there on the shock body is the pressure reservoir. And so the stock shock comes with a piston. And on one side of the piston is the oil, the other side is nitrogen, compressed nitrogen. And so in the stock setup, as that shock goes up and down, the air is being displaced. The air compresses while fluid does not, and so the air is part of the suspension system. The amount of air that you put in there calibrates how much compression you get out of that. So to go with the diaphragm, what the advantage of that is you remove the mechanical piston. That piston creates wear, and so over time, metal. The aluminum, even though it's hard anodized, it does wear. The rings inside of there wear against the aluminum, and so aluminum is transferred into the oil. But also the heat that's generated just from the friction of the piston and the seals in there. So to go with the bladder, you remove those two things. You remove heat and then the wear component, and you get a little more suppleness out of that, and it's a little more responsive. So it's inexpensive. It's a nice upgrade. The only downside is it's less durable than the piston. And so that bladder needs to be replaced. It's a maintenance item. In fact, I have a bike in my garage right now that I need to replace that because it just blew. It's in there. I think it's 4 years old and it just blew. And so the shock feels very bouncy. There's very little rebound. And that's kind of one of the signs that the air has gone into the oil, because that separation between the oil and air has been breached. So the oil cavitates with that air really quickly and you lose rebound, and the back end of that bike feels very bouncy and springy. And that's sort of the giveaway when that happens. So anyway, that's the backstory on that little diaphragm bladder thing.
You said that bike in your shop that needs that roughly has had that setup for about 4 years.
It's a 4-year-old setup, yeah.
Okay. Is that bike typically, what kind of riding does that bike get put through? Typically desert stuff?
Yeah, he's a trail rider and he's been to Mexico a couple times. He doesn't do it. It's not a race bike. He doesn't do anything extreme. Okay. And it's a race tech bladder. And I forget what they tell you. They will say, we could all look this up. The Google will know, but it's not a lifetime part. In fact, your shock should be disassembled and cleaned and inspected, I think 80 hours or so, every 80 hours. So Race Tech would just say, do a visual on it and then replace as necessary. I know guys who replace that. Like, for example, what I tell a lot of guys is if you have a carbureted bike, this just goes along with that. A carburetor, I rebuild every carburetor on every bike every 4 years, whether it needs it or not, because something in there is going to fail. And you know what's going to fail? When you're on a ride and you're really counting on it, that's when something's going to fail. So I would probably tell guys, maybe I'm a little overly cautious, but I don't think I am. Every carb, every time, 4 years. I rebuild a rear shock at least every 4 years. I'd probably replace that bladder every 4 years. So I also do all the hydraulics. So I do the calipers, the masters, the slaves on the brakes, and the clutch. I do all that every 4 years because those things are just wear components. They just wear out. The rubber seals deteriorate, and knowing my luck, I'm going to have a failure on a ride, and I'm going to hold everybody up, and I'm going to be that guy. So I just run that stuff on a 4-year rotation cycle. Tell us about your headlight. What did you think about that light?
Yeah, you're losing your audio a little bit. It's kind of glitching, I guess.
Uh-oh.
There you go. You're good.
Okay. Well, I won't go back and revisit any of that unless anybody has some questions on that stuff. What did you think about your headlight? You had the nice Baja Designs light.
Yeah. It was good for the speed I was running. Guys talk about it, outrun your light at night, but there's a reason why the pros run 2 lights, because they're running a lot faster than I am. But for your average rider, I think that's a real good light. It was nice. I ended up running the yellow filter over the whole time, for the dust, but there wasn't a whole lot of dust, but I just never took it off, and it worked fine. Of course, I had the high-low beam, but Yeah, that's the brightest light I've ever had. It's 10,000 looms, I think it is, that XL80. So,
XL80, 96, I think it's 9,600 lights. So it's 9,600 lumens. They say
yeah.
it's a 60-mile-an-hour light. What was your nighttime average speed? Well, there's top speed and average speed. Average speed's probably 15.
No, well, no, my average, to finish the race on time, you had to average like 24 point something.
Oh, okay.
So I obviously did that. I think it's 25. Yeah, night speed wasn't, 25 to 35, depending. North of San Felipe there, north of the highway there that we crossed, there's some dry lake beds up there. I got the cooking right along pretty good because I was trying to keep ahead of some of the other lights that were chasing me. But yeah, it was plenty of light for your average rider out there, for sure. Yeah, I was impressed. It'd be fun to use it locally here this summer when the weather gets nice to test it out locally. It'd be kind of fun. I know I went around the neighborhood the other day and turned it on, and it lights it up.
Bright as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any takeaways from your prep or your race, physically or mentally, that you would fold into your next race?
If I found someone to pay for it to do it again, I would obviously be in a little better shape. My lower back wasn't strong enough. Believe it or not, work on your neck muscles. You hang a helmet on your head for that long. I never done it for that long before on rough terrain. Your neck starts to feel it. And of course, legs. My legs were getting pretty shot towards the end. It was getting hard to stand up. So a little better physical conditioning. Obviously, you can never be in too good a shape, right? Mentally, everybody's different. In my opinion, if you're gonna do it, you go till you can't stand up. You go till there is absolutely nothing in your tank. I remember pulling into, we call it the fuel line pit, where I finally got into the pits after the fuel line issue. And Bryce or somebody told me, yeah, a couple of the Ironmen dropped out. We heard on the radio. I'm like, well, why? Well, they were tired. Huh? Yeah, no shit, you're going to get tired. So to me, that doesn't even compute. So mentally, if you're going to do this, you have your head straight that you're going to go till there's no more in the tank.
So they would have to take you off the bike. Somebody would have to tap you out. You wouldn't do it. Somebody would have to look in your eyes and see that you were dehydrated or you were in some sort of medical condition and pull you off. You would not tap out yourself.
Well, Bryce, I'm sure, I go back and watch a couple of the videos we have at pit stops. He can probably elaborate more on how I was acting. I'd come into the pits and just kind of sit there. You're like, get off the bike, dummy, because you're just kind of so fogged out, and it's even hard to lift your leg off the bike, right? So after being on the bike that long, so you kind of pull in there and just kind of like, hey, I made it, cool. Now what? Like, get off the bike so we can fuel it and check it out. So, yeah, I'm starting to blow bubbles there towards the end a little bit.
Punchy. Bryce, jump in on that.
Yeah, Garrett was definitely out of it at a few of the pit stops. I mean, he was getting a little lethargic and obviously hard for him to get off the bike. There was a few times where grabbing the bike and trying to help him get his leg over the fender just to get off, so he could get something to eat real quick and a drink, and so I could check out the bike and get him going. But he was towards the end really wearing out. So it was good to see he actually made it anyway, and we had a win in the book.
So you guys ended up sixth in class, right? Fifth or sixth?
I think it ended up being sixth once they reinstated Mike and Mike.
Yes.
Once they put him back in, which that was a whole BS deal. But yeah. So there was 15 in the Ironman class, and I guess they ended up sixth. Obviously, guys dropped out. One guy finished behind me, and then I just couldn't quite catch the guy ahead of me. On the last pits, I think Bryce said, yeah, the guy ahead of you is like 10 minutes. And I just didn't, I was kind of trying to catch him. I just didn't have it in the tank, man. I just was so nervous after that last pit, which was race mile 730. Just don't crash. I don't know if I can pick this bike up now. I'm so tired, right? Or I'd get, stupid little injury, It was just survival mode. From the time the sun came up from the next day, and the sun kind of broke the horizon there, I hadn't climbed the, that was around race mile, I don't know, 625, 650, whatever. It's a real fast section. You're kind of a slow climb on the valley floor heading towards the summit, they call it, and it's real fast. I'm just winging it out. It seemed like I was winging it out, but I'm pretty tired. Going as fast as I dare. And I dumped it once in a corner there, and you know, had the real deep sand and big burn, all burned out from the trophy trucks, and just a stupid tired, you know, front tire washout, and over the bars I go, no big deal, slow speed. Picked the bike up, and I started up, put it, you know, started up, go to dump the, you know, tap it down, get it in first. I go to dump the clutch, it just instantly dies. Bike didn't even lurch. What the hell? Make sure I'm in first. Start it again. Dump the clutch. You know, I'm not trying to take off fast. I'm just trying to take off, right? Get going again. So I'm listening for trucks or buggies coming. You know, I'm right in the middle of the track. And I looked down, and when I dumped it, that's really loose sand, a bunch of sand packed in around the front sprocket, and actually got in between the packed so tight, made the chain go super tight. It packed in. You follow me?
Yeah.
Around the front sprocket and chain.
Like
and
running a rag in there, like you had just some obstruction.
Yeah, and I'm like, so I looked down and I figured out that, you know, I see my chain is just super tight. I'm like, crap. So I figured I see what the problem is. I'm like, so I kind of dragged the bike off the course there a little bit, and I'm like, crap. Now I got to take my vest off. Now I got, you know, everything's a big deal by this point in your head. Now I got to take my vest off, get my tools out. I'm gonna have to loosen the chain up, right, so I can spin it and then put it back together. And to me, at this point, I'm thinking that's a big deal, right? Because I know I'm running short on time, and I'll give it one more try. So I fire the bike up, go to dump the clutch, and it's kind of brutal. I don't beat on my bikes at all, but it kind of bang, and it obviously spun, got the sand out of there, and I'm like, crap, man, did I break my transmission, you know? So I take off first, second, real easy, and go through all the gears, downshift, upshift, yeah, we're good. So away we went. You know, I didn't have to loosen it up or nothing. So, and that was just before the summit, which was I'm glad I didn't pre-run that. I actually wanted to pre-run that section. I'm glad I didn't. I actually didn't do any pre-running to speak of, but because that was brutal. That was ugly. That was first gear for a long time, climbing that.
Nighttime trophy trucks on your ass. Do you have any stories about that?
It'll get your attention. The first one, it wasn't bad. I happened to look back and see lights way back there, long straightaway along this fence line, and it was just before the Matomi wash, which that's a long wash. Anyways, so I was able to get off and just kind of take a break for a couple of minutes while he blew by, and just kind of one guy bouncing through there, no big deal. And, I don't think any other trucks caught me in the wash. Maybe one did. I got out of the way because in the wash you can see their lights flickering off the canyon, so you got plenty of warning. And then a lot of them caught me on the dry lake beds north of San Felipe, and I could kind of see them coming. I could glance back once in a while once I knew they were in the neighborhood and see them coming. And that dry lake bed was so wide I wouldn't have to stop. I just kind of get off the course but keep going. And they come flying by. And that was really cool because you could see the navigator. He kind of give you the wave like, "Hey, thanks," you know, as they're flying by at 100 miles an hour. But it was cool to see those trucks in full tilt boogie mode and hitting bumps. And then of course my light would I'd veer in behind them a little bit. My light would kind of hit, you know, cast the, you know, you can see under the truck as it all twisted up, bouncing. And just full tilt getting it. It's pretty impressive to see them a full song in the dark. But they were pretty cool. They didn't, you know, crowd me too bad or anything. I kind of gave them as much room as possible. A handful of them caught me when I was climbing the summit during the daylight, and they'd start hitting their sirens pretty early. I glanced back and nah, you ain't close enough yet, because they were struggling up to the summit as well. They're going pretty slow. Once we got on the backside of the summit, around race mile 700, they were starting to pick up speed. They were getting pretty antsy. They come up on you pretty quick, hitting their sirens and stuff. And I quick decided to jump off in the brush, basically, you know. and they just gas on by me. But I don't know. I wouldn't want to get in the way of one.
When you just said miles 700 just then, that's just, I just want that to sink in for a minute. That's mile 700 of a continuous run, a continuous ride. I did, the longest single ride section I've ever done was in the Tour of Idaho a couple years ago, and it was 283 miles. So on the bike, off the bike, 283 miles. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to have to lay on the ground, call an ambulance to like take me to my hotel room. I was just completely knackered, blown apart. 283 miles would be a percentage. I don't know what percent. How what's the total miles? This one was 863.
No, I think it was 806 or something. Just call it 800, but.
Okay. So what's that? Somebody good at math.
Yeah,
Is that a
but
third? So I did like a third of what you did.
But give yourself credit. I've done part of the Tour of Idaho. I know how gnarly it is. Yeah, it's gnarly. There's parts of the Tour of Idaho that I've done that's pretty good. It'll wear you out. And so is Bryce. He's done a little bit of it.
Yeah. So mad respect to you, my man. Mad respect.
It's just a long trail ride.
A long trail ride. I loved it when you said that. That's genius.
You know, I think there's a lot of guys that are capable of doing it, that in the back of their mind would like to give it a try. They're capable of doing it. You just have to get the right mindset. I'm not here to win it. I'm here to survive it and finish it. That was my mindset anyways. I just wanted the medal. It's all I wanted. Not to brag. It was for me, for some different reasons. So I just had to finish on the time. That was the goal. We cut it close.
Made it, dude.
The bike did great, flawless. You know, but in the back of my mind, there's certain things about these bikes that make me a little nervous for longevity. But it got me through. So the fuel pump stuff, the fuel pump thing. If anybody ever develops a fuel pump that can be reliable as one that's in our cars, pickups or whatever nowadays, that lasts for whatever, 1,000 hours or whatever of bike riding. They'd sell them like hotcakes, right? If you could guarantee your pump would last for 5,000 hours. But it's just not the case. So I'm glad we swapped out what we did with the MyFuel system. But on long rides, I'll always probably pack a spare. That's the way I feel about it.
Yeah. Bryce, you want to add anything into the whole prep? I mean, you were basically the team mechanic. Is Bryce still on here? It looks like he dropped off maybe. Do you guys in the peanut gallery have any questions for Garrett here?
Yeah.
Let me figure out how to unmute anybody. I think you can unmute yourself too.
Yeah, check your settings there. It looks like most people.
Okay, you got me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, I'm down in New Zealand, so great site.
Yeah.
I just sort of what is it, 10 in the morning here or something, so great timing. Thanks for that. Normally when you guys do these things, it's like 2 in the morning, so it's a bit hard to get up for. Just with gear and comfort and stuff on the bike, have you guys heard of a product called Steg Pegs built in Australia down here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, that's it something you consider running on that bike for those sort of miles?
I absolutely would. I've never used them. They were on I have a big board back here of list of stuff we were going to put on the bike and did, and that was on the list. A lot of guys run them. Some guys love them. Some guys, whatever. Everybody's got their personal opinion, what works for them. I wanted a set because I understand the concept of them and how they could help on a ride like this. It came down to a budget. I was running out of money. I was out of money. Otherwise they'd be on the bike. Absolutely. I think for my style of riding, it would have helped conserve energy. They'll lean back on them a little bit. I stand a lot. Help them, just take some of the pull off of you, what they're intended for. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I run them on a couple of my bikes. I mean, I don't ride. We don't have desert stuff down here, so we don't have that massive long open stuff. But even like on trail rides and just adventure riding, and when you're standing up, just being able to lock your legs in takes all the weight off your arms pretty much. So I think for that sort of riding, it would really help you guys.
Yeah, I know some guys love them, and I'd like to try them someday. I'm sure I'll eventually end up with a set and give them a shot. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Nice. Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, because I can see a lot. Most everybody's muted if they want to say something. He's unmuted. I think Bryce is having some technical difficulties over there.
I'll chime in with another thing if no one else has got anything.
Yeah, good. Get after it.
Hey, on that whole fuel system thing, I saw something, I can't find it on another post, of someone that had ditched the internal filter and was running an external filter like out on the frame somewhere. Do you guys know what that would be, or is anyone down there doing that? Because I mean, I don't know, I'm no tech expert, but I think half the fuel pump thing is that a lot of guys just don't change them that often because they're not that easy to change. You've got to pull half the bike apart to do it. And you know, if there was something you could just pull a canister off, plug another canister on without having to pull the tank and everything off, then maybe you'd change it more often and maybe you wouldn't have fuel pump issues. I don't know. Is that a...
Yeah, Mike, maybe we could talk about that when I jump in and do the little tech part, because I've got a bunch of bits and pieces and components here, and we'll kind of go into what all they are and how they work. So maybe we could address that then.
Yep.
Hey, see, Bryce is back. I think Mike, you had a question for Bryce earlier.
Oh, Bryce, as the crew chief on the bike, do you see that there would be anything you do next time differently? What were the successes, and then what were any items you kind of punch list?
Somebody's got a lot of background noise.
Yeah. So really, the one thing that I wish we would have done was that 90-degree fuel fitting, just to tuck that fuel line out of the way, which is really the only problem we had. Besides that, I and Garrett, we had a lot of time involved in just making sure everything was tucked away, double checking. I mean, we didn't get a lot of time on the bike after the build before the race, which would have been nice, but in hindsight, I mean, it all worked out. We double checked, we triple checked, we used good quality parts, we took our time. I mean, 45 days was plenty of time, I think. So,
if you have your skill set, Bryce is a wizard at working on bikes. I mean, that's what he does for a living. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we had like 3 Sundays that I came down and worked, and we worked for probably 8 or 10 hours. And, you know, we just started a task, finished it, started something else, finished it. We made sure to not leave anything unfinished. And aside from that, really, it's just being diligent to dot your I's and cross your T's, you know. I mean, it's just important to have it dialed in, I guess.
Yeah. Obviously, the fuel line issue was a 1 in a million. We couldn't recreate that if we tried. And now it has happened to other people. The goofy stick coming up, grabbing the hose, whatever. But is what it is, right? I got a 90-degree on there now. We're good.
Ready for next time.
Bryce, remember, you mentioned to me how you couldn't believe how much sand was in that little inline filter.
Yeah, that little tiny OEM inline filter that's right after the quick disconnect. Garrett had his fuel line nigger rigged, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times in the sand, and that thing was packed with sand when I popped it. Yeah, it was packed full of sand by the time I got it taken out. And we swapped into just a straight fuel line. Just a piece of, I think it was 1/4 inch. It was stretched, and we got it to work, and we did it.
Yeah. So Bryce, your theory was, even though there was so much sand packed in that little filter due to my uncleanliness, trailside, repairs, which, yeah, that was crazy in itself, how many times I had to deal with that. But what was your theory, that the fuel pressure was actually making the sand almost float in there instead of packing?
I assume it was just enough turbulence that kept the gas flowing through it. The sand granules were big enough that it kept it turbulent instead of just packing in there like, silt, not quite like mud. But yeah, I was amazed. I mean, that little tiny filter there was probably 2/3 full of sand when I took that off and just put a straight line on it. I honestly, I was shocked the bike even was running.
So real quick, so the stick came up as behind Mike's, going down. It's basically a dry riverbed, whatever. Anyways, the stick kicked up, ripped the fuel line right at the quick disconnect. So it broke the quick disconnect. So I couldn't obviously use it anymore. And I thought we were done. I was in the process of texting Bryce he had an InReach Garmin and I had a Garmin InReach. So I was going to text him, say, hey, we're done. I don't know. Come get me some way, somehow. And then Larry Janeski, another Ironman guy, stopped by. He stopped and said, hey, what's your problem? I told him. He sat there for a minute. I don't know if he's a pretty quiet guy, doesn't get too excited. He's kind of sat there for a minute, scratched his head. He's like, well, just use your try your Camelback hose, Good luck, I gotta go. And then another Ironman. Yeah, right.
I gotta go because I gotta beat your ass.
Yeah, right. He didn't end up finishing. Anyways, another guy stopped, and my screwdriver was too short or too long. I couldn't get in there, and he had the perfect length. He gave that to me and took off. Anyway, so I take a pretty long stretch of my bladder hose and go right from the tank to the fuel injector. So just straight hose. And I'm thinking, man, I'm golden. Not thinking that, hey, this has got 50 pounds of fuel pressure going through it, and it's the hose not designed for this at all. I get it going, bike fires up. I don't even look at it. I just take off. I go about 15 minutes, bike dies. Well, it blew the hose. I cut it short, plug it back in, take off. I'm going through a creek crossing, it blows again. I dump the bike over in the mud, shorten it, plug it back in, get going again. Now, hindsight, what I should have done, like Bryce and I talked, why didn't I take my black electrical tape that I had with me, wrap it around the hose? That would have helped the hose from expanding, because the hose was expanding and blowing, right? That would have slowed that process down or eliminated it. So that happened 2 more times. Or 1 more time, then I got onto the nice, fast-paced road, and I'm just wringing this thing's neck for all it's worth to make up time. It blows 1 more time. I slid the bike to a stop right in the middle of the road, dumped it on side, cut the hose 1 more time, plugged it in, and made it to the pits. And I don't even remember what I said to Bryce when I came into the pits, because they were all wondering why I'm an hour and a half, 2 hours late from when I should have been there. I don't know. I must have mumbled something like, hey, the fuel line blew out, handle it. So, and then he took over from there, and we got a fuel line from another pit crew, and we just straight lined it. So that bike ran the rest of the race, no filter, no nothing between the tank and the injector.
I just had this thought of like replacing my Camelback hose with a piece of fuel line as a fail safe.
I don't know.
I don't see why you couldn't. Why that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Or just have maybe a foot of it just wrapped in your pack.
Or that.
May taste better.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it sounds so stupid that why didn't I think of it at the time to wrap the hose with electrical tape? I don't know. I just didn't.
All right. Any other questions? Jay, you popped up. It looked like you were going to say something.
Well, I didn't know if I came in a little late. I didn't know if you guys discussed tires or mousses, or what were you running on the bike down there?
Yeah, so I ran nitro mousse bibs, so that way no worries of flats. I was fairly new to the bib scene. I really like them. They held up extremely well. When I pulled them out, they still looked pretty much brand new. And
you're still running them in your bike right now. They're in your bike right now.
Yeah, I put them back. I put them back in. Yeah. The tires. What's
right?
that, bro?
Same tires and all on the bike right now.
Yeah. These are the tires that ran the race too. Really, people think you're going to go through a lot of tires. Now, I don't know why the pro guys swap them out. You see them swapping wheels at the pits, probably because they're afraid they're busting spokes and stuff, I would assume. I don't know why. Running sand, you're not chewing these tires up. Now, granted, we get on the dirt roads and they're really getting after it. Yeah, you're going to chew your tire up. Maybe they're swapping their wheels out because they just don't want any issues. And I can maybe that's why. But for your average Joe like me, I think my tires still have 60% on it probably. It's just the max, it's Desert IT, so I don't know. So the Moose bibs, in my opinion, if you're doing trail riding or even doing short jumps, on the blacktop, it's okay. They'll make it. I mean, I wouldn't go 50 miles a hot, 90-degree day on the blacktop. I wouldn't do 100 miles, but maybe they'd make it. I don't know.
All right. Any other questions? Ned, you got any questions? You did the Dakar. You got any questions for a Baja guy?
Oh, wow. Who did the car?
Ned here.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing I'd add is I've done a lot of, many 100-mile days in high heat on mousses. So you don't actually have to be that afraid of them on blacktop, on pavement. The whole key to the system is, first off, they have to be really well lubricated. And second of all, they have to fit correctly. So if a mousse goes in easily, like if it's not a tight fit when you install it, then you're going to have too much motion between the mousse and the carcass of the tire. And then that just makes heat, and then the mousse will die, and that does happen. But I think if you have a correctly fit mousse that's correctly lubricated and a correct tire, I mean, I've done, in Dakar one day, there was a 500-mile liaison, 800 kilometers. It's probably minimum of 100 degrees and more like 120 degrees Fahrenheit for most of it. And it's like, I was really worried about how the bib would hold up, and it was fine. It was not an issue, but it was a desert mousse in a really stiff tire that was really well lubed. So if you run a soft mousse in a loose fit in a tire, or they get dry, you'll be done.
Oh, wow, I'm glad you brought all this up, because there's so much talk out there that bibs can't run blacktop, bibs can't do this and that, they can't. And obviously, you've had a different experience. Granted, everything was, as long as everything is proper fit, proper lube. I mean, I lubed the hell out of mine, pulled them out, and they were still lubed up great. So
yeah, another thing that I wonder about, people use tire soap for them instead of the silicone that they come with. I think if you're changing them pretty often, the tire soap works fine. But I think I think the tire soap can dry out, whereas I think the silicone really doesn't. So if the bib's going to be in longer than a couple weeks or whatever, I think the silicone's a safer program than tire soap. But of course, it's more expensive too. So, the other thing, just I guess, two anecdotes that came up for me listening to you. Before I get there, first thing is congrats. That is awesome. I sold the Baja 500 in 2004, and it was like such a great day. And I remember getting off the bike and being like, I don't have another 300 miles in me right now. Like, that's not that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
The two stories that just made me laugh. First is that I was right near Mike's this past winter on a 450 XCF, like going up a creek bottom, and had a stick go up and break so on mine, it broke the female side of the quick disconnect at the tank. And I got super lucky. I'd already replaced, yep, exactly.
That's the part that broke on me.
Replaced the fitting that Mike's holding up with a sort of a standard practice for me is to put a, what's it called? A hose clamp type connection rather than that crimped connection.
Okay.
So I had put a hose clamp on already, so I just undid the hose clamp, threw out the female side, slid the fuel line over the end of the fuel filter, and was good to go. But it makes me laugh that two of us had the 1 in a million, like probably within not very many miles.
Well, that's what's really weird. Yeah. So the 1 in a million stick in the fuel line happened within the same part of the planet, right?
Right. Exactly. So that's kind of funny.
That's weird.
Who knows? And there was another story that you reminded me of, and I can't think of what it is right now, but it's cool stuff. It's awesome what you did. And it's,
yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
I have a hard time remembering. I don't remember all of it. I'll try to daydream back, try to remember parts of it. There's a picture of me. It was one of our night pits, our night stop there, right at the highway there, the highway crossing there in the race there by north of San Felipe. And Bryce was knelt down working on the bike, and I'm just standing there, you know, in full gear, helmet off. And my wife is next to me. It's dark, and he has the pits all lit up. It's kind of a cool picture. I don't remember that pit stop. I don't. I remember leaving, kind of thinking to myself, man, this. What am I getting myself into? Right now that I'm halfway through it. I don't know. A lot of it was my pit crew. None of us ever done this. Their preparedness. I mean, I could really get used to having a pit crew. To be honest with you, dude, if you've never had a good pit crew or any pit crew, like I never had a pit crew before, but to have one that was good, man, that spoils you. It is just, you get off the bike and it's handled, man. People are helping you and they're filling the water, feet stuffing food down your throat.
I'll have my people do that.
Yeah, right. It is the coolest thing ever, but it's so uplifting. It gives you that boost to keep going, right? And what was weird is we had talked about, okay, so we're gonna do a pit here, and we drove by the day or a couple of days prior, actually scattered other locations, a few except for one of them. But you really don't know where they're gonna be, right? So you've been riding for hours and miles, and you're all wrung out, and you're like, okay, I'm coming up on my pit. Damn, I hope they're here. Where are they at, right? You're trying to find them, and all these people and chaos and dark, and everybody looks the same. And you know, of course, we had a pit board with my number on it, and that's what saved me every time, is seeing someone waving at me with my pit board. And there they were every time. That's pretty cool. Really cool, actually.
I remember the other thing I was going to say, which is just that when I raced in Baja and when I raced Dakar, I had the exact same program you did of just saying, like, I'm here for the finish. I'm here for the adventure. I'm here to enjoy being on my motorcycle. And it's a long trail ride, and I'm not here to try to prove anything to anyone other than myself.
Yep.
And I feel like with that in your mind, it's such a different experience than when you see these guys that are just like totally wound up in where's the next guy, how am I going to beat him, whatever. And I feel like I understand that there's like kind of a front of the pack where competition is a different thing. But I feel like for all of us kind of, so to speak, mortals that are in the middle of the pack, it's such a better deal to just go into it with your own, hey, I'm on my own adventure here, and however long it takes, and I'm going to ride the best I know how to ride. And that's such a cool place to be in your head.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's what's maybe holds up some other people from tackling these big rides. Doesn't have to be Baja, doesn't have to be Dakar, any big ride or race or whatever. If you're not a professional big time racer, then swallow your pride and say, you know what, I'm just here to enjoy the ride, the adventure. I'm just here to finish. And for most of us, the finish is the victory, right? So I was able to get there mentally, which made it a lot more enjoyable. Man, I had a blast. I mean, out loud in my helmet, that first leg of the race, I'd say to myself, holy shit, I'm racing the Baja 1000. This is nuts. How I got here is beyond me, but I'm here doing it. It's been in the back of my mind since I was 13 years old. First time I saw the dirt bike magazine or whatever. And Baja seems this far off land with people who are far more talented and whatever than I am. You know, that's just a dream, right? So here I am doing it. And yeah, if you can just approach it, that was my approach. And that's what actually made it enjoyable. Not having that stress of having to finish in the top 3 or whatever, right? So that's a good time.
So to that point that you guys are both, you and Ned are both making, the Mint 400 is a Vegas-based race. And when I was a kid, my dad and I used to go out. He was a ham radio operator, and he was a relay. So back in the day, there were no transponders, there were no electronic systems, none of that. So there were guys who were just out along the course at certain spots, and we would, with binoculars, we would jot down the number as a vehicle would go by. We would jot down a number, and we would get 20 numbers, and then he would get on the ham radio and would call those ahead. And that way they could determine whether or not guys were shortcutting, whether or not guys had broken down in between certain pits, and they were able to sort of keep track of the course and the flow of who was still on pace, who was off pace, who was not, and who wouldn't, and if you broke down between what pits. So when I was a kid, we used to go out there and I would write those papers down. I'd fill up a log sheet of 20 numbers and I'd hand it to them and I'd do 20 more. So the Min 400 has always been a part of my life. And I raced it last year for the first time because they just reintroduced bikes the year before. I couldn't, my schedule didn't allow it. So this year I did. I raced the Min 400 and I did not want to take it seriously. And I wanted to sort of create a visualization for average Joes like us that you don't have to have a specific bike that is super well prepped. So I grabbed a bike out of the fleet that was average. It was kind of clapped out, is about half. The plastics were mismatched. It looked beat up. It was unimpressive. And in fact, so much so that I got a lot of side eyes when we were in contingency pre-race, because I was flowing along with professional guys, with other amateur dudes, but who had spent a ton of time and money prepping out their bikes. And we used electrical tape for our numbers on purpose. We low-browed and low-budgeted the whole thing. And I wore a suit. I wore a 3-piece suit to do the race in. All of this to project the image that any schmuck can get a piece of crap bike with, some good tires and well-maintained. I clearly went through it and made sure that it was up to snuff, but it was no special bike. It was a 500 with blinkers and a key and, the whole thing like yours. And I raced them on 400 and I was 36th overall. And so 36 out of 89 or something. I was solidly mid-pack. I was absolutely mid-pack, which was more than acceptable. I felt like I had an average setup and I placed in an average position. I was 4th in class and 36th overall. Wow. I was happy with that result, wearing a 3-piece suit. So the moral of that was, like you guys just said, ride your race. Don't try to beat anybody else and enjoy. And there were times where I was just in my helmet thinking, I'm freaking riding the Min 400. Like, this is so incredible to me, this race, which is epic and just mythic. And I was in it and I was experiencing it. And the whole day was a thrill, an absolute joy. But any schmuck should go out. The barrier of entry to this stuff is it's up here. It's in your head. You talked about that early on. Decide to do it. Make a commitment to yourself that you want to do it, and then throw yourself into it. Ned, you did the Dakar. That was probably a huge mental game before you did that. How did you talk yourself into that?
Well, the first thing I was going to say, just relating to your story, is it's like, if you want to dress your bike up, if that's fun for you, whatever, that's great. But I feel like so many people they make excuses not to do things because of budget or et cetera. And when you really get down to it, there's so much less that you have to spend than what you can spend. And so it's cool to just realize, like, so much of what people choose to make a barrier to entry is optional.
I agree. We had a good set of tires and a well-maintained bike. Granted, it was a kind of a garbage bike, but well-maintained, and it was fantastic. We did just fine. It was more than we needed. How about that?
Yeah. And then to your question about how to convince yourself to go do something like Dakar, it's like, I just got to the point where it became more important to me to answer the question of whether I could or could not finish that race than anything else was. Budget, like whatever. And so to me, it was kind of like I stepped into the unknown. I didn't know where my foot was going to land. And it turned out that, like, the world kind of came up, the ground came up and met it. And I was able to, pull everything together and so on. But it took commitment before I had a plan of how I was going to follow through that commitment. And Garrett, I see you nodding, and I imagine you might have a similar kind of thing where you're like, man, I got to do this more then I've got to do anything else. So I'm just gonna like step out into the unknown, and whatever it costs, whatever it, if I get hurt, if I whatever, it's more important to me to answer this question than any of those details are. And that,
yeah, you nailed it. That was exactly, I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, that's why I did it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Maybe we'll kind of close out this part of the call. We'll do some technical stuff, and that'll be a wrap. Anybody else? All right, well, let's move on. But if you do and you want to go backwards, then by all means pop in, and then we'll go back before we close. You might think something before we finish out. So let's just cover some fuel injection stuff. Let's go from the pump forward. So the question Mike asked earlier, Mike Harrison, and Garrett even brought this up regarding fuel pumps. If it was possible, why don't we have like a 10,000 hour fuel pump available for these machines? And really, it comes down to packaging. The whole fuel system is designed around packaging. And some of the limitations that we have on these motorcycle fuel systems has to do with the fact that we're riding a bike that we're trying to make from a design standpoint, we're trying to make it as small and tidy as possible. So everything needs to fit minimal space, be minimal weight, and then be maximum performance. And so we've got all these trade-offs that we're trying to make from a design perspective that we don't have in a car. And so when we're designing a car, we really don't have space considerations, because think about a gas tank on a car. We have a huge volume of area that we can fill up with pump, and then all of the mechanicals and associated components that go along with the fuel pump. It all fits inside of a really big gas tank. On our bikes, the biggest problem, we have a large volume tank, but our biggest problem is we have to fit whatever assembly we come up with. So this componentry here, this is what goes inside of the tank. So whatever we come up with, we have to fit that through some sort of opening in the tank itself. We have to create an opening, a hole in the tank to fit this through. The bigger we make this, the more of a packaging challenge that becomes. So from a design standpoint, we could make a better, bigger, more, a pump with a longer life cycle, a longer duty cycle, but it would have to be bigger. And so that hole that we fit, we've all seen on our tanks where we've got underneath the seat, we've got that opening, and then all this stuff needs to fit through so we can get it down inside of the tank. It's all trade-offs. If we make this bigger and more robust, we need a bigger hole, and that means design impact on the tank, and then the fitment of all this. So at some point, we just have to say, this is good enough. Like we've balanced all of the objectives to whatever point we say that's where we're going to set the bar. Then we go from there. And so as it happens, this is the stock pump. And so some of the limitations of this pump are brush life and then impeller. And the weaknesses of the stock pump are the fact that the impeller, I have one of these that I've cut apart, and I should have brought that, so my bad. But basically the fuel gets drawn into here, and there's sort of like a fan blade, a hydro fan blade down here in this section of the pump, and it pushes the fuel through the pump itself. So gas is pulled in here, it's pressurized, and the pressurized gas goes through the body of the pump, and then it exits up here at the top. So gas is flowing across the armature, across the magnets, across the brushes. This is all cooled and lubricated with the gasoline, and the gasoline under pressure is going through the body of the pump. And so they've maximized the space to do that. Like a lot of times on a hydraulic pump, you'll have a pump motor, and then there'll be some sort of gear, offset gear, and then the impeller will be a separate chamber, a separate body, a separate component to the pump itself. So this is actually very clever to package it this way, where it's all in one assembly. And again, design trade-offs. And so everything is as small as possible. So one of the downsides of this stock pump is the impeller is the shaft that comes off the bottom of the motor, the armature of the motor. So the impeller and then the shaft, it is not splined. So the manufacturer, this was a low bid. So think about this. Whoever this company is, I forget who it is, but these guys were the low bidder to bid for the contract to offer this pump for KT.
And lasted well into the
And so
industrial
one of the
revolution
things
when
that
robots were neither
it suffers
cheap
from,
or reliable.
let's see, do we need to mute somebody? Okay, so one of the design choices that the guys who designed this pump was they did not spline the shaft of the pump, and they did not then have splined where the impeller fits into it. Ooh, look at that, like that, guys. So the alternative to this is a California cycle work. So we've got two competing pumps right here. This one is the OEM, and then this one is by California Cycle Works. So this same pump is sold to Ducati. It's sold to Aprilia, KTM. There's 3 or 4 bike manufacturers that buy this exact same pump. And this guy, Kevin with California Cycle Works, a couple of years ago, he's a Ducati racer. And Ducati guys, this is in a Ducati Monster. The same pump that's in our bikes is in a multi-cylinder, multi-injector Ducati Monster. And so he was seeing a lot of failures with this pump. So he kind of reverse engineered it and came up with a pump that has some design improvements. And so on his pump, the impeller, the shaft is splined, and where it fits into the impeller, that's all splined. So this may have a tendency to spin off. The impeller will spin on the shaft. Well, this does not do that. He used bigger magnets, better glue. I've seen these pumps fail where the glue that holds the magnets to the body fails, and then the magnet just becomes dislodged, and the two attract to each other, and that kills the motor. So he used bigger magnets, rare earth magnets, different glue, and this pump is a little bit longer. He just added as much extra volume in the magnets and the motor that he could. And so this pump makes some design improvements over the stock pump, using the same exact architecture where the pump transits the fuel through it and then exhausts out the top. So, you know, there's not a huge amount of failure on these stock pumps. If they were, KTM would do a recall. And so we've all heard of guys who have had pump failures, but very few of us have actually had pump failures because I don't want to say it's rare. In Baja, Mexico, I've replaced 3 of these pumps on the beach, in the dirt, with hand tools, out of your backpack, doing the best you can, transferring fuel out of that tank into other tanks, and it's a pain in the ass. But we've done it. So I've replaced 3 of these in the field when they failed. I probably ride more with more guys, different guys, than most of us do. So I'm more inclined to see more bikes, which would be more failures. But I would say 3 out of maybe a couple hundred guys that I've ridden with is not a huge number. It's not really on my radar. But like what Garrett said, every time I ride, I carry a spare fuel pump. I carry a spare fuel injector. And then I carry a couple of these little guys. I carry fuel line. I carry a hose, one of the connector hoses. So I've encountered enough failures to bring with me secondary backups for things that are most likely to fail. So that's the first sort of component here on our fuel system. And when you take this out of your tank, this pump motor lives down here on the bottom. And so the inlet for the fuel is right here. And if you've ever pulled your tank off, you know that there's this big 17-millimeter nut that screws into the bottom here. And so this is where fuel is drawn into the pump. It goes through the pump. It leaves here at the top. And then as it transits, it goes into the pressure regulator, which is up here at the top. And so the fuel pressure regulator is this little guy. And it's as simple as can be. Pressurized gas comes through the port here. There's a spring inside of this chamber right here. There's a bearing at the bottom of the spring, and that spring is calibrated to maintain 51 PSI. So whatever the raw pressure is coming out of the pump, I've never measured it. Let's say it's 52 PSI, whatever. So 52 PSI is presented here at the bearing, spring loaded, spring pressurized here, so that we get 51 PSI out of the port. That 1 PSI of extra is returned back into the system through the bleed off hose. So let's see here. So the fuel that goes to the injector comes through the filter. Okay, so it leaves, yeah, you can kind of see that right there. There's the top of the pump. Here's the hose that is connected to the filter, and that line right there is our raw pressure. So our unmetered pressure comes up here, and then it goes into this little cavity where the regulator sits, right, like that. And then our metered pressure, or our corrected pressure, comes through this hose, through this line, and then out this port. And that's the port on your bike where this stuff goes, okay? And this is the outlet port at the bottom of the tank. So the tank, these two little ports here would penetrate the tank and poke out of the bottom of the tank. This is the one that has the pressure, and that's where your elbow, your connector, so let's just pop this guy on there. That's where this thing fits. And if you have one of the older style bikes, you have the straight through connector, so that's the 90, or you have the straight through connector. And so we've all seen the different variations of this, but let's go back to this. And so here's your 90. And from that 90, then we have a little piece of hose. Here, let's just transition to this now. So let's talk about this. This is where that fuel line pressurized from the tank goes. This is the female connector. This is what both Ned and Garrett had fail on them. And if this gets hit, it's plastic. There's not a metal alternative to this. There's only the plastic one. And so if this was to break, then you just would lose your fuel. Inside of here is a spring and a plunger and a ball. And if you disconnect your fuel line, this goes to the injector. So this is the male side. So these two click into each other. Now, as a quick aside, we've had a lot of posts, and a lot of guys will have bike breakdowns when they think that they've installed this and they've put it together, but it's not clicked. So guys will just slide that in, and it'll become difficult, and it'll feel like there's no more movement to be had, and they'll think it's connected, but it hasn't clicked. When it clicks, it's released the little ball, the check valve ball that stops the fuel. Ned, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple things. One is, in addition to the parts that you carry, I think it's a good idea to carry that O-ring on the male end there. That O-ring is really susceptible to damage. Another O-ring that I like to carry is the one on the fuel injector that seals the fuel injector in. Those are real small and real light to carry, but they can kind of save you. Yep, exactly. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is I always take and just wet my finger and run it around that that O-ring there, and that will really help alleviate the issue of it not wanting to slide together as clean and not clicking and then not allowing pressure through.
Yes, I've had 4 guys in the last couple months come over to the shop with bikes that won't run. And I just visually look at this. I've gotten to the point now where I can just see visually that this is close but no cigar. And then I say something smart ass like, are you ready for me to fix your bike? And, you know, what's this going to cost you? Right. And then I just go, and then their bike starts right up. So this is a huge, you know, goof up moment where a lot of guys have a lot of problems with this. And what Ned said is true. Sometimes you can just spit on this. What I usually do is put grease or even engine oil. You can just pull your filler cap off, dip your finger in there, get some, it's going to be scalding hot probably, but you know, get some oil or something on there, some KY, some Vaseline, who cares, some lube, yuck, and then that went in quite a bit easier. So that click is what you're looking for, and then you can see visually that there is no gap right there. So, and then this line here connects to the injector. There's a piece on the throttle body that I don't have, but there is one intermediate piece between here and here, but you kind of get the idea. And so we have a very short hose length between the injector and then the pump. And any questions before we kind of continue on? Mike, you had a question about this, I think you did, about this fuel filter right here?
Correct. can we eliminate that from the system and mount a different filter on the outside of the tank so it's much easier to change? And the main reason I ask this is I'm planning a 3-month trip from Colombia to Santiago in South America, and obviously I'm expecting to be dodgy fuel, and to have a filter I could change once a week, every couple of days, whatever, without having to pull the bike apart would make life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, that's a great question. And Jay, who I don't know if he's still on here, but he's about ready to launch on an around the world trip on a 500, and he's taking Paul Stewart with him. I'm not sure if he's on here, but that is a very good question. What would be the upside or the downside to removing this in-tank filter from the system? Because we also, so we've got 2 main failure points here. We've got the pump itself, and then this filter. A lot of us have heard of, or maybe had an experience where the welded seam here on these MAL filters splits. And I've talked to a MAL engineer, male, how do you say that? German word, MAL? Whatever. You know what we're saying here. Molly? Okay, so I've talked to an engineer here about this, and they do a hot weld. So this is not glued, it's a hot weld. It's melted. You know, piece A is melted in a little press against piece B. And they say that they pressure test these to double rating. So he did not know what that number was. He just said, quote, double rating. Well, we know that the pressure regulator on these bikes, wherever that went, that pressure regulator holds on these bikes to 51. So we could infer that these things are at least tested to 102 before they leave the factory. And so, and yet we see these fail. I've seen these fail. A lot of us have seen these fail. So what are some alternatives to this plastic filter? Let me say, for full disclosure, I really like these and I use these, and I've personally never had one of these fail. And I'm going to probably continue to run these for the single reason that I like to be able to look into my gas tank with a flashlight and see how dirty this is. And I don't have that option when I convert over to one of the Wix metal filters, which are very popular and is a good alternative. I have no problem with these. There's also this Earl's brand filter, and that's a good alternative. So there are metal-bodied alternatives to the plastic body filter, and they're both fine. I don't have anything against them. I just have that personal bias towards I like to see it. Now, a lot of guys will ask the question, why does this get black? Why is it dirty? How come when I change this filter and I turn the gas out, it's black? It's like jet black coal. Anybody know why that is? Is that road dirt?
Brushes.
It's a fuel pump, isn't it?
Fuel pump.
Yeah. Yes. So this filter does one job. It keeps the fuel in the gas tank that's recirculating clean. That's what this filter does. So if we kind of go back to this, let's say this thing, I said 51 PSI and then the filter was unregulated at 52. It's not. I bet you this pump is probably putting out like 100 PSI, okay? So that means half of the fuel volume that's coming out of this pump is just being recycled in the tank. Well, that continual and constant recycling of the gas puts the brush carbon in the gas. And so this filter, it only has one job in life, and that's to filter out the brush, the carbon out of the brushes, so that as little brush carbon as possible is transferred into the rest of the fuel delivery system. So if you, Mike, if you took this filter out and you did not have this filter, I don't know that I'd have a big problem with that. Although what you would be doing is recycling unfiltered fuel through the tank continuously that would be adding carbon and onto carbon in the tank, in the gas. And so what this does is it acts as that remover. You're just continually changing this and continually removing brush carbon from the system. So I don't have anecdotal experience that says you get any better service in either direction, better or worse, by not having this filter here. But that's just what happens. That's what this does. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So so the book would tell you that you need to change this filter at the first 30 to 40 hours. That's because when the pump is new, it's going to shed the most carbon. So a brand new pump will shed the most. The filter will trap the most, and then as the brushes get more seasoned and broken in, they will shed less. So the first filter is frequent, you know, at 30 hours. And then I'm usually changing these 150-ish thereafter. And 150 for a guy who's riding his bike full time is maybe a week or two. For most of us, this is like a year or two. So you're going to have to make some choices about what filter you use and then how often you clean it. I probably would not run this. If I was a long distance guy, I probably wouldn't run this. I'd probably run something like this that was cleanable. And even the metal filter, the Wix filter, it has the same paper surface area as this one. The only difference is this is a metal can versus a plastic can. And now a lot of guys will say this is a carbureted filter off of Yugos. So this exact Wix part number is an OEM filter for Yugos and like Chevy Chevettes and Dodge Caravans. There's a handful of carbureted 1980 vintage cars that run this part number filter. And there's a guy on YouTube, a bald guy, who wants to sell you, you know, $100 fuel filter replacement. And he says, don't run this filter because it's a carbureted filter and it will tear itself apart due to the fuel pressure and because it's not fuel injection rated. And we have tested these and disassembled them. And the thing that I would say to that is we are not flowing a huge volume of fuel to tear this apart. It's just not the case. We're talking about a 1/4 inch hose. And at the end of the day, this is how much fuel we are consuming. We're pushing fuel through 16 little micro nozzles. We are doing 50, I once read the spec on this injector for our bikes. It's 30 cc's per minute at 50% throttle. So most of us are typically at cruise 35% throttle. And so if that's pushing 30 cc's at 50% per minute at 50%, at 30%, it's what, 20 something cc's? So there's just not much volume that we're flowing through this filter. It's not tearing itself apart. So to your use, Mike, what I might do is use something like this. This is a serviceable, cleanable fuel filter, and it has a sintered carbon internal, or not sintered carbon, but sintered brass. And so if you had this on your bike, you could pull this apart and then pop that out, clean that with carb spray, and then reassemble that, and away you go. That might be a good solution for you. Have you guys seen this particular one? This is a Earl's. I get these from, I can email anybody these part numbers, or you can just screen capture this or whatever, but this is a...
Any concern of that O-ring there on the cap of that crapping out?
I have not. I have not put a ton of hours on these, but I have not had any issues with these filters. So these two issues are these two filters. Nobody that I know of, and I have guys that I stay in contact with that have a bazillion hours on these. No one's had a failure with these. However, a lot of us know of failures with that.
Well, what about my idea of mounting it outside of the fuel tank so it's easier to clean and change more often?
Yeah, so if you just straight pipe this, you lose in-tank filtering. So your recycled fuel in your tank is no longer filtered. Yes, you're filtering it on the outside down here, but you're already doing that anyway. You're already filtering it with your little micro cone filter on your quick disconnect, right? You're all familiar with this. So in here, you have a little mini cone filter. That's your downstream. So this is a 10 micron filter. This filter here is a 40. So that's a 40, and then it goes down to a 10. So you already have that. You could upgrade this with the zip tie. This is a nice bit of upgrade. And then this filter right here would replace the male side. This would take its place, and then this will click into there like that. And that offers you this 1-inch disc, double ply stainless steel, 10 micron filtering. So this would be your downstream. So if you got rid of this, I would at a minimum recommend that you really highly upgrade this. Don't run your little gray cone. Do something like this. Thoughts, questions on that?
I'm running that ball guy's fuel filter.
You know what? I like his filter. I like it.
I just had to say it.
One of the things that is a legit, he's got a handful of things that are real deal legit components. That's one of them.
Yeah.
So that Earl's filter, I only just discovered that thing like maybe 2 weeks ago, and I was like, that's it, you know, because both Garrett and I have that bald guy's filter, and I was like, this is like, I don't know what was like $20 for that Earl filter.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
And I was like, it's basically the same thing, but it's extremely cheap. And if I remember right, the bald guy's filter is still a paper element inside a cartridge.
It's a paper element inside the cartridge, and it's about 50%. I just had one in the other day, and it's about 50% as long.
It's big.
It's huge. It's hard to get in the tank.
And he gives you a shorter hose up here, and it puts a bit of a kink up here at the top, and that hose split on a guy because of that kink. And so he opted to get rid of that for no other reason than it was just really long. It's just a very long filter, and it puts kind of a disconcerting kink in the top of that proprietary hose that he offers. And so for max reliability, we got rid of it, and then we put in this. And the advantage of this is it's much shorter, and it is very cleanable, and it's that sintered bronze.
I like that one there, the black one. Hindsight, I would have went that route, and I might still, but
Right.
Mike, and this is for Mike Harrison. One thing I would say is that KTM employs a whole bunch of really smart engineers, and I'm a little bit skeptical. For me, it's like there has to be a really clear argument to go away from OEM as it relates to reliability. And so, you know, I can see arguments pro and con, but I feel like as you're building your bike for a really long trip like you are, my personal feeling is anywhere you can stay OEM, you'll rarely regret it.
You know, fair point. I appreciate that. I guess I might be swearing here. I don't know which bike I'm going to take there yet, and I may take my 701. And the 701, the fuel pump's right at the bottom of the tank. It's a real, you've got to pull all the back of the bike apart and flip that whole tank upside down. Then you lose a third of your tank of gas anyway. It's not like the 500 where you just take the tank up, tip it upside down, and it's not that big a deal. So it is a, you know, slightly different situation potentially if I end up taking, so that bike's fully rally kitted and everything. So I may take that bike over there.
Yeah, I think to make Ned's point, I don't want to garage. I don't want to home make anything different than what the OE has provided. The only upgrade in my mind that really would be of value would be to get a bigger filter and then something that was cleanable. And this is a very good solution for that. This is a good solution in that it's metal, not cleanable. So this would be an upgrade. So like this, if we're going to call this stage 1, stick with OEM. Stage 2 upgrade, go to a metal. Stage 3 would be go to metal that's cleanable, and that's probably it. The best dual sport filter is actually really good. I just wish it was shorter. My only ding on it is that if it had a cleanable element and it was shorter, then I think it would be ideal. And you know, he could probably redesign it.
it's a replaceable filter, but it's whatever.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that. So this just maybe point of information. This is your low fuel light. So on your dash, whenever gas drops beneath this, there's a I always say it wrong. Thermistor, thermal resistor. So the light bulb that's on your dash, you have power running through the bulb, not backwards, but the circuit is looking for a ground. This resistor, when the gas is over this resistor, the gasoline cools the element. And so electricity wants to flow through that resistor, but the resistance goes very high, creating an open when this is cooled by the gasoline. When the gas drops below this, then the electricity now, the resistor starts to heat up. And so the gas is no longer cooling this. As resistance goes up, then, resistance falls because the temperature, electricity starts flowing through that. That generates heat. And the heat is what then creates the pathway to ground. The resistance changes sufficient to allow this to find ground, to see ground. As soon as ground is presented to the circuit, the bulb begins to light. And if you've ever watched that bulb on the older bikes, when it was an incandescent bulb, it started to glow dimly and then get brighter to full intensity until you noticed it. And the reason that it grew is because the resistance went up and up and up, well, we go down, down, down until the light was glowing. And then when you fill the tank back up, this thing cools off. So if your light isn't working and you know your bulb is good, then your resistor is bad, or the blue wire has broken off, it's just soldered on there, or up here on the blue connector, something's happened there. So that's what this little guy is right there. And then a lot of times on the forums, guys will ask, well, how do I know, how can I test my fuel pump? Just to hotwire your fuel pump. And it's really simple. The center is the ground. One of the grounds, the black ground goes to the pump. The white ground goes to the thermistor, the what we just talked about. And the red is your power, and then the green or the blue is the return side of the thermistor. And if you just invert that to this side over here, how do I, when you see this on your bike, you're seeing it like this. You're kind of looking at it from the top. And so you've got the red, the center ground, and then the blue, and you would just jumper, you would hotwire the red and black to power, and that would power the pump. And so you could test the pump. And if you ever needed to know what those terminals were, you could just message me and I'll tell you. But that's how you would see if your pump is working or not. What else? Let me just cover a few quick other things and then we'll wrap this up. This is Golon. Golon is a manufacturer that makes an inline pump. I'm sorry, an inline filter, zip tie. We already looked at this. They make that one. This is not that style, but Golon also makes one that clicks in. And so the only difference between these two is the fact that Golon has a really very cool aircraft grade disc that's perforated. And so all of these folds increase the amount of surface area for the filter. And then the zip tie is a single sheet. Well, it's a double pleat. There's two sheets of this, but it's a flat. And so they get away with about, well, they say it's more, and I believe it. They say there's more filtering capacity here than over here in a smaller package. So the Golon filter is just a smaller package doing the same job, more filter surface area. You know, now that I see that, they're actually pretty comparable, but this is smaller. And so that is that filter. And then lastly, with the fuel injector, there is a 10 micron filter inside the bottom of the injector. So let's finish with talking about the injector. I've had breakdowns in the field because the screen, which is not serviceable, you can't remove that. It's shoved down in there, and to remove it would destroy it. But there's a 10 micron. So your filter media is, you have a 60, no, it's a 40. You have a 40 micron screen that is the pickup little disc down here. You've all seen that on the bottom of your pump. So that's the 40. That's just like the trash filter, you know, the pickup little screen down there. That's just like a trash filter. Dirt, you know, sand, whatever, prevents that from going in there. Then your inline is a 40. That's for the carbon. And now we get to this guy, or this guy, or the little cone. And these are all, here's another one. These are all 10s. So that is between your tank and your injector. And then your last point of filtration is on the injector itself, and that's 10. And if this ever gets clogged, you're dead. And so we had this happen to us on a ride down at the Grand Canyon. Bike was dead. We did all of the things to troubleshoot. We checked for fuel pressure. And here's a quick hack. I'm gonna make a video on this hack, but let me show you this really quickly. If you ever needed to just try to deduce, is my pump putting out any pressure? You could remove this little tab clamp and pull your hose away. So all you're left is the metal side of this male connector. And so with that clicked in, now I could put my finger over this and I could press the start button on the bike. And if the pump is pressurizing and there's pressure to this point, I'll be able to spray fuel out of this because it's pressurized. So that's a quick pass or fail way to just really easily find out if my pump is working or not. And it was. So it was not that. And we checked this filter. I think we had this one and I just blew through it and fuel came out. And so that wasn't it. And so it was, now we pretty much deduced the injector was not spraying fuel. So we took it out. And then what we did was we put it on, well, we removed this assembly from the throttle body and we cranked the bike and no gas was squirting out the injector. So we knew we had gas to the injector. We used a trouble light. I had a test light and we could see that we were firing the injector. We had electricity going to the injector, but no gas coming out. So what we did was we took the injector and we reversed it. We put it in this line, put a clamp on it. We cranked the bike and then we took 51 PSI, which pushed out backwards through this injector. And no gas came out for a second or two. And then all of a sudden, whatever was in there that was plugging it dislodged and we had a little squirt. And then this thing was just dribbling, running gas. And that indicated that it was then free, it was clean. And so we reversed it, we put it back together. And sure enough, now we had our nice spray. Put it back together, the bike ran. So this is a final filtration point, and I did not pack my spare injector, which I always did, and so we had to clean it in the field, and so that's your last spot on that. So that's the fuel system start to finish.
And what's a fuel filter cost? I'm not filter, fuel injector.
These are $145.
Right.
And
given that female plastic piece is broken on a couple of guys, are you better to that quick connect? Are you better to biff that and just run that Golan filter with a couple of hose clamps and not have that disconnect?
Yes, that's what this style is. This is hose clamp.
Yeah.
So what some guys will do is they will slice this piece here and they'll insert that. So they have, this is stock, and they continue to run the little cone filter. And they're really filtering their gas. So they keep that, they slice this in, and so now they've got two filters going. Is that?
But why not eliminate the stock one and the quick connect? That way you can never break that plastic fitting when a stick flicks up there.
He's talking about He's talking about getting rid of that quick disconnect completely, just running a filter.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Do it like this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
And then if you ever have to take your tank off, you just would remove one of the hose clamps here and then pull your tank off. It's going to add 3 minutes to the job. So what?
But it removes the point of failure, potential point of failure.
You eliminate this point of failure.
But you want to, if the stick goes in there and she's bulletproof tough, something's going to have to give.
Yeah, so you'd likely tear a hose, probably. You could also pop the hose off of the injector. So something in the system would probably pop off. Hopefully, though, the hose pops off and then you could just put it back on. Hopefully, you wouldn't break anything. Oh, there was something I was going to say about. Oh, yes. Okay. This is as big as it is because there's a little check valve in there. You can kind of see there's a spring and then the little white plastic deal. When you take the tank off your bike, you've got 50 PSI of gas right here. You notice that when you disconnect this on your bike, you only get like a drop or two of gas coming out because this shuts that down. If you did not have this and you went straight, when you pulled this apart, you'd have 50 psi of gas, and it will shoot out of there all over your leg, all over your bike. And so, yes, so if you do something to eliminate this, be aware, be advised that you're going to have high pressure gas right here at this connector, at this hose. And so a simple way to do that would be to remember that. Just disconnect your electrical connector from the fuel pump, run your bike, start your bike, crank your bike until you've used as much fuel as you can until the bike just won't run anymore, and you'll drop from 50 down to about 15. And then when you pull this apart, you'll only have like 15 psi of gas at this instead of 50. What else? Any other questions?
When are we going to Baja?
We have to sneak across the border because we can't go through legally. Let's sneak into Mexico.
All right.
Ned, do you have anything to add to any of that fuel system stuff? Eric, Mike, John, is Thorn Parker on here, I thought? Anybody else?
Actually, on that filter, the black filter, the one that's serviceable, would it be possible for you to throw a part number up the other one, the black one, the in-tank one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me read it to you here.
Hold on, let me get a pen.
Can you see that number?
Maybe. Let me make it big.
I can read it.
Yeah, just go ahead, fire it off. Read it.
Okay.
Read it out.
So it's Earl's. It's manufactured by Earl's. And hang on, I got to get my freaking glasses.
You're old.
I was not prepared for this.
I saw 7.3 and then I was lost after that.
Okay, 731155 ERL 731155 Edward Robert Larry. And I get these from Summit Racing. You can probably get these on Amazon. You can probably get these anywhere.
Okay.
The only thing I don't like about these is they have a larger, this is the American size. This is like 10 millimeter. This is a metric size hose. And this is the American equivalent of whatever 10 is. And it's a very difficult press fit. In fact, it just barely goes over it. So pro tip, use a hairdryer, not a heat gun. Use a hairdryer and just get this nice and warm. Run this under your hairdryer until it gets hot until it gets very hot to the touch. And then once that thing is nice and hot, also put a little lube on this, some engine oil or grease or whatever. Little grease. With this hot, it'll pop right on there. You'll be able to slip it over, and then you'll put your clamp on there. If you don't heat this up, man, you'll never get it on there. And so to service it, it becomes kind of a pain in the ass because to unscrew this, you are going to have to remove the hose and take off the clamp, and you almost always destroy this. And so we sell a little service kit where that's where these hoses are from. I sell a little service kit that comes with the clamps. I happen to like these high pressure clamps over the tab ear clamps because the tab ears are a one shot, one time and you're done. And you use something like this, you can use it over and over. And so it's just a little preference thing. There's no, I have discussions with guys who say you shouldn't use these types because the worm gear could fail, which is true. And they swear by these. These are a one-time only thing. I happen to like the one that has a captured screw and a nut. They, to me, seem, and this could be placebo safety, but these seem safer to me than these. Preference. But just that point being, when you service this, you'll probably wreck this, but you can get replacement hoses. Not a big deal.
Oh, thanks.
All right.
I just looked, they are on Amazon for like $15.
Wow.
Oh, you just found it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Ned.
I do, to throw props to the best dual sport guy. He has a true 10 millimeter, so his fits on very clean. It is designed around that size, where this is not. This is for the American market, and this is just a little bigger than 10, but you can make it work. One other quick thought. I have guys all the time who say, well, why not just put a piece of rubber hose in the tank? It will deteriorate. If you put gasoline, if you put this kind of hose inside, completely submerged continuously, it will deteriorate over time. It'll soften up and it'll burst. If you were continually replacing it and updating it, I don't know that that would be a problem for the short term, but for the long term, don't do that. It fits on really easily. I mean, look, you could just say, well, I just pop that on there really quick and easy, but it will deteriorate. Anything else?
There was a chat question that popped up, Mike. I don't know if you can see it on your side.
Oh, yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
For the zip tie filter, how many filter screens come with the filter body, and how often do you wreck a screen? I've never wrecked a screen. It comes with one. I'm not going to be able to pull this apart. I don't have any tools here, but this is what's inside of it. And from Zip Tie, you can get a filter kit. I happen to have removed this disc out of the replacement rebuild kit. So this is exactly what you get from Zip Tie Racing. I'm trying with no success to get this back in there, but you get the idea. So this is what a replacement service kit from Zip Tie comes with. It comes with this O-ring that Ned was talking about carrying a spare. Comes with the new one of those in the package. It comes with the two filters, or the two O-rings that sit on this O-ring. This disc is sandwiched in between two O-rings. And so it comes with that. That's sandwiched in there like that. And so you buy the filter, and theoretically you could service this for life. But eventually this O-ring may fail, or the two internal O-rings could, well, they won't fail, but they'll just wear out. Or you could pinch it, or just for peace of mind, you just, you know, every couple of years, you just want to replace all this. You can get from Zip Tie Racing a complete rebuild kit, and it will come with the new disc. I've never seen one of these fails, but anything could happen.
And what was the other brand, the silver one?
Silver one is made by Golan, G-O-L. Where's my glasses? G-O-L-A-N, Golan, G-O-L-A-N, Golan. They make two versions of this. This is called the Mini. They make more filters than just this. This is their smallest one. They make one that's hose, and then they make one that's hose KTM. So you can get it either way. This thing was Earl's. And then this is the plastic one. This is the OEM version from Melee. So those are all your filter. Oh, and then there's that Wix one. And this Wix, if you wanted to do this one, this is part number 33095. 33095. And this has the same problem as the Earl's does. And this is not 10 millimeter. It's a little bigger. So you got to heat this thing up to get that in there. So you end up having that same problem. The only ones that are Euro spec is this one, and that's it. Yeah, that's the only one that's Euro spec. That one is 10 millimeter. Did we cover it? Are you bored? Wow, we went 2 hours.
Was it really? Holy crap.
2 hours. We did you for an hour, and then I did my blah blah for an hour. Hopefully this was worthwhile. Would you guys want to have us? I think we should do this weekly and rotate through different guys. Does this seem something like we should try to do every week?
Yeah, it's really great. I mean, I'm happy to take my phone out and show you some of my bikes another time. Well, not nothing special, but if you know, just see what we do down here in New Zealand or whatever people want to see.
Heck
Hey,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I mean, there's definitely other groups on Facebook. I'd love to share the link. So if you create more of these, have it be a shareable link, and then I'm sure we're all a part of other Facebook groups, and we can share it there, so you can get more folks on this.
Okay, right on. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm stoked and excited you did.
You could have
Your boss.
You could have something on the group there, or maybe suggestions for topics or whatever. Obviously, you'll come up with something, but there's enough guys out there with these bikes by now that have encountered some maybe one-off things that they'd like to share or talk about too. fixes they've come across.
I like it. And I'm sorry that I had to show things like this. That's probably not as effective as maybe if I rigged up a camera. That was an overview, and maybe I had these parts spread on a desk. That might be better. So I'll come up with a better mousetrap for that.
That's cool. That's cool.
All right, everybody. Peace
All right.
out. Be safe.
out.
Thank you.
Later, guys.
Later.
See ya.
Later.
Awesome. Get my glasses on so I can see how to turn it off.
Hey Garrett,
Huh.
I'm just
how
gonna.
about your
hit
what
my-
about your metal quick disconnect?
I saw you
Bryce,
smile. I saw you smile on that.
Bryce, what was that?
We were talking about the quick disconnect, you know, on the fuel line.
Yeah.
There is a metal version of that.
Here?
Yeah.
For real?
Yep.
Let me spin my bike around and show you.
Send me. You know what? I've seen
Remember-
that.
Remember we talked about? I thought you and I talked about that.
Yes,
Maybe.
there is a metal version. I apologize.
The only downfall is it is a little heavy in comparison to the plastic model.
Yeah.
But there again, you make that system so bulletproof, something's gonna give if a stick goes in there. But what are the odds? You know, it's 1 in a million shot that happens again. So
Yeah. I personally, if it was me, I would leave this plastic because I would want this to break. And I would bring some spare hose with me, and I would do exactly what you did. I would just go straight hose. So I would leave this plastic because I do want something to fail. I don't want, you know what I don't want to have happen? I don't want the intermediate connector piece on the fuel injector to snap. Because if I snap that piece off my throttle body, there's no plan B for that. You're cooked, you're done. So I would protect the throttle body side and use this as my sacrificial breakage point. I really like the idea. It came up of running direct hose here. Get rid of the quick disconnect and just go hose. But you have no failure point. This is not going to fail. This is solid. And so something has to break, and it's probably now going to be back here at the injector. So I would rather the breakage be here. I'd rather keep that plastic, and I would probably backstop this with just a piece of hose, fuel line.
after putting on that metal one, I started thinking about that, going, man, this system's getting so beefy. I don't know. You know, we might want to have a weak point, and that might be that factory plastic version.
Yeah. I don't know. This is the stuff you stay awake at night thinking about, and there's so many what ifs.
Yeah, you can what if yourself to death and hypothetical, blah, 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 all day long, right? So,
Yeah.
Main thing is get out and, Bryce knows, I fret about fuel pumps failing. Then I'm going to be
about it.
Then I'm going to be on some mountaintop goat trail somewhere and have to helicopter the bike out because my fuel pump gave out, you know. Happens.
Yeah. Everything's going to break, man. Everything's going to snap. Everything's going to fail. I think I'm pretty clever that I figured out just run fuel line for your water hose. Now you've got 2 feet. Maybe not that much. You've got 1.5 feet of gas line on your backpack. Huh?
I'm saying. Well, in fact, when we left that pit, those guys gave me a little extra. Not that I needed it, but like, here's some, take it with you. And it wasn't even fuel line, was it, Bryce? It was
heater hose, but it worked.
It was like little 1/4-inch heater hose or 5/8, whatever that is.
Yeah.
We got home, we got to pulling it apart. I'm like, this isn't even fuel line.
Yeah. But it held up way better than Liat's helmet set.
No kidding.
Although the Liat helmet set where it quick connects to your helmet will also plug into KTM's fuel connector.
So it's the same disconnect thing. I'm trying to find that. It's this one right here.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's the same one.
That's part of the story I didn't tell. Okay, so the water bladder hose I was using was just, anyways, part of the system, right? Well, I had chewed all that up by blowing it out 4 times. My very last choice was the piece I had on my helmet for the water line.
Yeah, the piece that comes out of here and goes back.
Okay, and that has a that has a quick disconnect in it. Follow me?
Yeah.
Okay, that will fit into that KTM system.
That's this right there. This guy.
Yep.
So
Doesn't even leak.
in the middle of the road, I'd used up all that hose. It'd blown all out. I pulled my helmet off. I looked at my helmet. I'm like, this is my, oh, hey, let's just try this. So I put it in and well, heck, quick disconnect, right? Clicked it, and away we went.
That is pretty epic. They had no idea when they designed that. Unless this is some sort of industry standard, it's very likely the CCP setup is some sort of industry. This could be used in factories and water treatment plants, wherever they do a lot of fluid management. This could be very standard for all we know.
Well, it must be, because when I did that on the road there, I'm like, well, what the hell? I crammed it together, and I come in, and Bryce is like, what the hell? How did you know that was going to fit? Well, I didn't.
Yeah.
All right, well, right on,
cool,
man. Yeah, Bryce and Garrett, thanks guys for being a guinea pig and doing this first one with us. It was very valuable.
Yeah, that's fun. I think a lot of people, maybe once the word gets out, might want to join in and share their experiences or whatever.
Yeah, we had 12 at the height of this. We had 12. I was thinking 10, so we're better than.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, that's fun.
7. Who are these Who are us losers that are still on here listening to all this nonsense?
Well, how come they won't do video?
Right.
Oh, burn. John, Zach, Adam, Thorns. I'm not sure who that is.
I don't know.
Well, maybe they're driving and.
Oh, that could be, I guess.
Yeah, or they're at their in-laws for Easter, and they've got an ear thing in, and they just trying to do something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So Jay was on here. Jay was the homie with the big beard. Do you know who that guy is?
No.
He cool dude. He sold his house and bought a bike, and he's been on the group, and you can see his bike. He's got it. It's a Husky, and he's got a round headlight mask on it, and he's got the.
Is that the guy out of Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri? Okay, yeah, I follow him on Instagram.
Yep, Jay, the Gypsy Rides or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
And the Grateful Dead dude, and he and another homie, Paul Stewart, RTW Paul, they are gonna go around the world. And in fact, they already missed their target date. They were supposed to have left like a couple weeks ago. They were gonna go. They were gonna crate their bikes and go to England, and then from there right across Europe and Russia, and then go down through Asia and come loop back around. But with all this virus nonsense, they're obviously on hold. And now instead of going Europe side, they're going to go down through Central America and then ferry across. So their plans changed, but Jay has built that bike to go around the world.
Yeah, that bike, the little bit I've seen of it online, it's pretty cool.
Looks good.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, you did a good job setting it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I'm putting pieces together now.
Yeah, that's him. Paul Stewart will be on maybe next week. Maybe Jay or Paul will see if they can get those guys in.
Cool.
All right, homies. Good times.
Awesome, dude. Take care.
Okay, later, everybody. See you, Bryce.
Wait. See ya.
Yep, see ya.